Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're immersing ourselves in a searing collection of narratives from V.S. Naipaul, exploring that really volatile point where deeply ingrained tradition just slams headfirst into rapid, often cynical change.
We're taking you inside three incredibly distinct micro-societies. First, a tiny Trinidadian village election right in the early days of democracy. Then, a suffocating, almost absurd London corporate office.
Oh, completely.
In the middle of all this post-war anxiety. And finally, a Caribbean island that is just grappling with this sudden, overwhelming economic boom and, well, cultural collapse.
And I might be separated by geography, by culture, but they share this profound core DNA, don't they? They're all these highly structured environments that are struggling to manage chaotic politics, trying to reconcile identity and, I guess, just survive the purely transactional nature of power.
Exactly. It's all about the transaction.
Yeah. So our mission today is pretty sharp and focused. We want to give you the shortcut to understanding how ambition, sincere belief, and perhaps most powerfully pure, calculated opportunism manifest when these structured worlds, be they political systems or corporate schemes, start to fracture under pressure.
And our sources for this, they function as a meticulous, if often hilarious, roadmap through this societal chaos. We've got the fiercely satirical look at local democracy and the suffrage of Elvira. Then there's the chilling examination of bureaucratic identity and really the terror of obsolescence in Mr. Stone and the Knight's Companion. And finally, we have this deeply evocative portrayal of cultural and economic flux in A Flag on the Island.
And if you're looking for that central unifying takeaway, that single thread we're going to hold on to throughout this entire deep dive, it's this. In every single one of these settings, the original, often noble intent,
right,
whether it's the purity of the democratic ideal or the philanthropy behind a welfare scheme or the authentic identity of a local culture, it is rapidly and systematically distorted, appropriated, and ultimately corrupted by human cynicism and sheer self-interest.
We are literally watching how fast good ideas go profoundly bad when they meet the unfiltered reality of, self-preservation.
Okay, let's unpack this first environment because it is just so rich with absurdity and detail. We're talking about the political crucible of the suffrage of Elvira.
Right, so we're in Trinidad around 1950, and this is important. Universal adult franchise was only introduced 4 years prior, so this is all very new.
And it's not governance from some lofty capital city. This is local democracy as a chaotic, high-stakes farce where a political win translates directly, and I mean directly, into immediate, concrete personal gain.
This is a system where the candidate is almost incidental. It's the brokers who are everything. And the whole scene is set with our nervous candidate, Sujpat Harbans.
Harbans, yeah.
He's this thin, dyspeptic man. His internal discomfort immediately signals his unsuitability for the boisterous, demanding nature of the contest.
You can just feel his anxiety coming off the page.
And he's driving this dilapidated Dodge lorry plastered with these bright red, fresh Vote Harbans for Elvira posters, which, instead of empowering him, just make him feel intensely shy.
The journey itself is just a perfect metaphor for the state of local governance, isn't it? He's struggling up Elvira Hill, the highest point in the county, and the roads are already this dreadful mess of ruts and ravines.
And he can't help himself. He's literally counting the potholes, even while he's trying to secure a future where he might, ostensibly be the one to fix them.
His private anxiety is focused on the immediate inconvenience, not the grand ideal of public service.
And that reality, that potholes matter more than philosophy, is immediately reflected in how power is transacted. Harbans needs capital. But his capital isn't abstract political platforms, it's cash and influence, wielded by these local strongmen.
And the biggest player he has to approach is Baksh, known contemptuously but very accurately as the Mouther.
Baksh is a fascinating character because he represents this specific type of effective, modern influence that completely overrides traditional morality. He's a tailor, he's a heavy drinker, which means he's violating the religious injunctions of his Muslim community.
But it doesn't matter.
Not at all. He controls over 1,000 Muslim votes, and this just shows the transactional community structure at work. Religious orthodoxy, like that of his poor, grubby rival hack, it just doesn't compete with raw, secular influence and personal favor.
So the negotiation, it's this art form of direct leverage.
Oh, absolutely. Bakchi's flanked by his son, Foam, and he just starts the bargaining. He demands $80 a month for Foam to manage the campaign and the exclusive use of the loudspeaker van.
And Harbans, who is just hesitant and desperate, he tries to argue that he already has a Hindu campaign manager, Lorcor.
But Foam, whose nickname itself, Foam, short for foreman, suggests this rising working-class pragmatism. He just cuts straight through all niceties. He just asks, flat out, you ain't want no Muslim vote.
And that's it. It's the ultimate statement of clear-eyed leverage. You want the block vote, you pay the price.
And that price isn't just cash, it extends deep into the societal structure.
Precisely. Which brings us to the second major power broker, Chittaranjan, the goldsmith.
Who is completely different from Baksh. He's aloof, he's stiff, defined by his status symbols, his polished red steps outside his house, and, most memorably, his flashing gold teeth.
His negotiation is silent, it's far more subtle, and it carries the heaviest implications of all.
Status consolidation through marriage?
Exactly. The expectation is crystal clear. Harbans' son must marry Chittaranjan's daughter, Nellie. It's this unspoken negotiation that Harbans has to tactfully acknowledge just by looking at Nellie in a way that confirms to the goldsmith that he sees and he accepts the terms.
So this fusion of political future with Harbans' family prestige and the goldsmith's wealth, it makes the transaction complete. In this microcosm, you just can't separate your political life from your familial duty.
One is just currency for the other.
But these arrangements are inherently fragile, aren't they? Loyalty is a commodity, and it's easily sold. Harbans is already worried about Lorkor, his original Hindu campaign manager.
The one he mentioned to Bash.
The very same. He's defected to manage the rival preacher camp, accepting $100 a month. And this just foreshadows Lorkor's final monumental betrayal.
Which is what? He just sells them all out.
Completely. He eventually sells off 800 Hindu votes to the preacher camp for $500, cashes out, and just leaves Elvira entirely.
Wow.
He helped destabilize the whole society, profited, and simply left the chaos behind for everyone else to deal with.
It's fascinating how this chaos is amplified by forces that are completely outside the political realm. I'm talking about the pervasive superstition.
The fear of the evil eye, the milieu of the local patois, and the practice of obeya, a form of folk magic, these are not abstract concepts here. They are real election-altering threats.
You see it with Mrs. Baksh's anxiety, which is triggered by a sign she sees that reads 10 die.
And she immediately links it to the number of people in their household, including a newly arrived dog they've named Tiger. It's instant magical thinking.
And this is where Naipaul really shows the deep cynicism of the power brokers. Chittaranjan, the pragmatic goldsmith, he doesn't try to dismiss the superstition.
No, he weaponizes it.
He does. He suggests calculatedly spreading propaganda that the Jehovah's Witnesses, this bizarre new external disruptive force, are the ones working obey.
And by doing that, he distracts the local voters from the actual political rival, preacher. This is how the campaign is run, using ancient fears to solve these modern political problems of distraction and misdirection.
Well, speaking of the witnesses, they truly embody this sort of existential threat to the whole democratic farce, don't they?
They do. They're represented by these two figures, Miss Short and Miss Tall, riding their red American cycles, displaying their awaken penance.
And their message is that politics is a man-made evil, not a divine institution. They're basically telling people not to vote.
And if people don't vote,
the whole transactional economy of Elvira just collapses. The brokers lose all their power.
So this forces the Harbans Committee into immediate crisis management, which results in this incredibly cynical social welfare committee gambit.
They realize winning requires more than just backroom deals. It needs visible community presence. So Dhaniram, the pundit, suggests tracking down sick or dying members of the Negro community, a demographic they had previously completely ignored.
His idea is, drive them to the doctor, pay for their medicine, show you care.
But then you get this calculated cruelty in Chittaranjan's counterpoint, which just grounds this whole decision in this horrifying local knowledge. What does he say?
He says, Dhaniram, you talking like if you ain't know how hard these Negroes is in Elvira? You ever see any Negroes fall sick? They just does drop down and dead. And that does only happen when they were about 80 or 90.
That statement is so critical. It's an expression of casual, almost clinical indifference, layering racism onto political strategy.
The underlying assumption is that this demographic is so resilient, they only die suddenly and at an old age, which makes tracking them for welfare impossible and, more importantly, politically unprofitable.
So they cast Mahadeo, the estate driver, with a much simpler, darker job.
Just to keep a sharp lookout for any Negro who falls sick or who fall dead. The entire concept of social welfare is instantly co-opted into a death watch, purely for immediate political capital.
And the ultimate cynical victory comes almost immediately with the death of Mr. Cuffey, who was a Negro supporter of the rival preacher.
Mahadeo, having been more focused on someone else who was healthy, gets the news late, but Harbans seizes the moment. He immediately pays for the wake, transforming the event into the most macabre election victory party imaginable.
The description of that wake is a masterpiece of grotesque social blending.
It really is. Harbans is mingling as if they're his guests, handing out rum, coffee, and biscuits. In one room, Mr. Cuffy's disciples are singing these solemn hymns.
While outside, men are singing a calypso about money.
A calypso that goes, O'Reilly dead and he left money, left money, left money. O'Reilly dead and he left money to buy rum for we. It's just this mourning, cynical campaigning, and sheer opportunism blended seamlessly into one event.
This transactional view follows right through to the aftermath of the election. Harbans wins, and his first act is to immediately trade his dilapidated Dodge for a brand new, expensive blue and black Jaguar.
And he adopts this almost artificial ascetic dignity to match his new status.
And the epilogue just confirms the pure calculation. The first official act is tallying up the expenses, settling Ram Logan's rum account, and engaging in this petty haggling over a promised case of whiskey for the winning committee.
Harbans is instantly transformed. He's aloof, wearing a double-breasted gray suit.
But there's a personal cost to this transaction. And you see it in the disillusionment of the power brokers. Chittaranjan, the goldsmith, is just crushed.
He had worked tirelessly, expecting that marriage alliance to be confirmed. He'd even made heart-shaped buttons for the campaign at his own expense, sacrificed one of his own shirts while canvassing.
And his pride is just shattered when Harbans, now a politician, offers no mention of the marriage. He realizes he was the subject of the same cynical transaction he helped create.
And the transaction just continues into perpetuity. The crowd, led by one of the supporters' husbands, starts heckling the newly elected official over the promised whiskey, demanding 10 cases for the people of Elvira.
And Harbans yields. He realizes he can't make a dignified run for his new Jaguar without giving in.
He coos 10 cases of whiskey, good whiskey, while noting the $400 cost. Democracy takes root, but only as this highly personalized, perpetually corrupt economic system where the cost of loyalty is calculated down to the last dram of rum.
That journey through the hot, volatile, world chaos of Trinidadian politics, it sets a perfect precedent for our next setting. The cool, gray, intensely rigid bureaucratic absurdity of London in Mr. Stone and the Knight's Companion.
Yeah, it's a total shift.
Here, the system of control is internal, and the threat isn't local power brokers. It's the existential terror of inactivity and corporate obsolescence.
We shift completely from raw external deals to the internal world of Mr. Stone, a man whose life philosophy is defined by an absolute aversion to the present moment.
He only finds true pleasure when experiences are fully processed, right? When they're docketed and put away in the file of the past.
Exactly. Only then, once they're history, do they acquire color and meaning for him.
He is a man who seeks pattern and continuity so desperately. His controlled environment is symbolized by these small, fixed details like his assistant, Miss Menzies, who compulsively rotates exactly 18 business outfits.
He needs the world to be predictable, and so his mind is constantly creating these, well, they're called grotesque escapes.
Those internal escapes are fascinating. He imagines flying, gliding along moving pavements, ignoring traffic lights, or flying up and down the office corridors, just observing the awe and turmoil of his colleagues.
And these fantasies, they provide temporary relief from his real, very manageable anxieties. The suspicious cat next door, and the secretive, delicate planning of his marriage to Margaret.
The marriage itself is structured around his need for control and separation. I love the word used. He abducts Margaret in installments from this private aged hotel in Earl's Court.
And there's that specific detail on the sign, Europeans only. It just highlights his unconscious need for a contained, familiar, and frankly privileged world.
Once she's established in his house, she first becomes an extension of his longtime housekeeper, Miss Millington, and then, surprisingly, she becomes an extension of himself, conforming to his quiet, domestic calm.
But that calm is deceptive. His anxiety intensifies, and it's driven by the clock. Every racing week just draws him nearer to retirement, which he views not as liberation.
No, it's a death sentence for him.
It's a form of intellectual and moral decline. He sees it as inactivity, corruption. His officeless Sundays just intensify this feeling of failure and the sense that the years he has compulsively stacked away in his mind were ultimately uncreative.
And the catalyst for his grand personal crusade, the creation of the Knight's Companion, comes after he observes Fred, a colleague who was retiring in Cornwall after 40 years of service.
And what does Fred get? Nothing more than a cheap watch and a joyless party. Mr. Stone realizes that the system just discards people, and this fear in himself manifests as this sudden, noble idea.
The motive is genuinely altruistic at its core, isn't it?
Yeah.
He envisions rescuing these men, his fellow knights, from the cruelty of obsolescence, protecting them from the isolation of retirement.
Preserving that vital sense of office comradeship, and in doing so, bolstering company loyalty. And the cost to the company, Excall, is minimal. It's about £20,000 a year.
It's a deeply personal attempt to fix a systemic problem that he fears in his own life.
But here is where we see the immediate, inevitable intervention of the transactional world, much like the election in Elvira. Virtue cannot exist in the corporate sphere without a processing unit.
Enter Whymper, the young, hyper-pragmatic PRO public relations officer.
Whymper is the complete antithesis of Stone. He views the idea not as an anguish to be solved, but as raw material to be exploited. He says it's good, very good, but something that must be licked into shape.
He renames it, gives it corporate flair, and he systematically drains the personal, emotional core, turning Mr. Stone's sincere agony into a marketable crusade for Excall.
And Mr. Stone feels this bitterness instantly. He has this sharp, painful realization that Whymper, this lusty young processor, is riding to success on his back.
The personal anguish that generated the idea has been appropriated. It's been stolen by the professional who knows how to sloganize and sell it.
And the irony begins to manifest almost immediately through the pilot scheme's failures, just demonstrating how bureaucracy corrupts intent. The most egregious example is the former department head who becomes a knight companion.
And what does he do?
He immediately uses his new role to fund a luxury tour through Wales. He sends in this ridiculously meticulous expense report for £249, 17 shillings, and 5.5 pence.
Complete with bills from expensive hotels and garages.
Proving that the philanthropic scheme has instantly become a personal expense account, the structure meant to save men from loneliness is instead funding greed and self-indulgence.
Then you have the tragicomic administrative errors.
Right. Due to poor biographical vetting, an inadequately briefed knight companion, a former messenger, is sent to visit this eminent, high-ranking retired Excall director.
This must have been so awkward.
The messenger, determined to complete his chivalrous duty, he just bows low and presents the confused director with a packet of co-op tea before withdrawing.
It just highlights the vast social stratification the scheme was intended to bridge, but merely underscores. It's a perfect illustration of good intentions executed through detached, class-blind bureaucratic error.
And what's truly fascinating, and where the sources explicitly connect, is the reappearance of that external, disruptive religious force.
The Jehovah's Witnesses.
Exactly. Just like in Elvira, where they destabilized the election, letters start pouring into Excall, revealing that another knight companion is using his right of entry to propagate the creed of the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Distributing copies of Let God Be True and subscriptions to Awake magazine.
It's the same publication being used on two different continents, disrupting two completely different structured systems. It just reinforces Naipaul's theme that any institutional structure, whether it's political or corporate, is immediately vulnerable to appropriation by external, strongly held, non-secular beliefs.
Yet, despite all this underlying corruption, Mr. Stone experiences a professional zenith.
He does. He's moved to the welfare department, given a new office with expensive Heels furniture. His salary is raised to £1,500 a year. He gets his photo in the House magazine.
He achieves that sensation he always fantasized about. The look of awe from colleagues, that feeling of flying and gliding above the mundane.
But the fantasy is shattered by the nadir, the story of the prisoner of Muswell Hill.
Right. This pensioner who is kept captive in his derelict home by his cat-hoarding daughter.
Mr. Stone and the scheme eventually rescue him, but the man dies shortly after his release, having completely lost the gift of speech. And his final terrifying and meaningless sentence is, "going to put you up for the MCC."
That specific final quote is so crucial to understanding the horror of it. The MCC, the Marylebone Cricket Club, symbolizes the absolute peak of English, establishment status, and privilege.
So for a man who has lost everything, his freedom, his dignity, his mind, to use his last breath attempting to climb the social ladder through a reference to an elite club, It just encapsulates the ultimate non-negotiable corruption of the human spirit by status anxiety.
It brings all of Mr. Stone's deep-seated anxieties, the terror of obsolescence, the fear of losing social standing right to the fore. It shatters the corporate fantasy completely.
And what follows is his marginalization. He becomes sad and exhausted, recognizing that the emotional energy that created the idea is just gone.
And the power shifts completely. Margaret, his wife, and Whymper, the processor, they grow closer. They start sharing these increasingly irreverent jokes.
Like Margaret asking Whymper about virgin birth, and Whymper replies, "What they call virgin birth, I call grudge birth. Somebody had it in for the husband."
The man who suffered the anguish is now just external to the successful, cynical structure that was built on his back. Even the House magazine quotes Whymper constantly. It pairs their names, but makes it clear that Whymper is the operating unit, the star.
And Stone attempts this pathetic assertion of authority by correcting a typist error in a letter-changing artillery to the misspelled itinerary, only to be immediately rebuked by a distinguished knight companion who corrects the spelling to itinerary.
He can't even maintain linguistic authority in his own invented world.
The final collapse is total disillusionment. When his friend Tony dies suddenly, Mr. Stone realizes his pursuit of continuity and structure was a delusion.
He walks home during a transport strike, utterly exhausted, and he sees that suspicious cat next door waiting for him.
And he calls out "pussy," a term of affection he had always withheld, and the cat just runs out, leaving him alone in the dark, empty house. The fantasy has vanished, the crusade is corrupted, and the structure has failed.
But in the emptiness, he finds a quiet, passive realization.
That he had survived, and in time, calm would come to him again. It's a surrender to futility, yes, but it's also a final, empty victory of survival over belief.
We move now to our third environment, a flag on the island, where the arrival of massive external infrastructure, an American base established through a lend-lease arrangement, is the central corrupting force, warping cultural identity and fundamentally altering the very concept of reality for the inhabitants.
The shift in setting is just so dramatic. From that gray London bureaucracy to a Caribbean island suddenly flooded with foreign money and influence, the landscape is literally altered.
Where the road used to end in a swamp, now there are glass buildings, air-conditioned bars.
And these massive advertisements shouting this desperate fabricated slogan, pride, toil, culture.
That slogan is so significant, isn't it? It suggests an identity that needs to be shouted to be believed, a desperate attempt to create a cultural structure that's suitable for foreign consumption.
And the narrator, Frankie, he immediately notes that this new reality, driven by the boom, feels profoundly unnatural.
The boom creates instant, often cynical, wealth built upon exploitation and the rapid adaptation of identity. You see it with Henry, a black Grenadian who runs a local club.
His success is founded on a deeply cynical observation. Local black Trinidadians prefer buying goods from non-black faces, which is a clear sign of that colonial hangover and internalized racism.
What does he do?
He hides. He runs a Chinese-named bakery, Young Man Baker, which is explicitly fronted by his Chinese wife, while he, the successful businessman, remains behind the scenes.
So success requires shedding your visible identity, adopting a mask of foreignness to profit from your own community.
We also see the literal destruction of what was, quiet, stable poverty. You look at the Lamberts. Mr. Lambert, possibly of Scottish lineage, an ex-civil service messenger. He suddenly benefits from the boom by using a lend-lease truck for contracting work.
And their new wealth just destroys their old life. They sell their simple, beautiful wooden house for building materials and erect this generic, status-driven, concrete block house.
And crucially, Mr. Lambert loses his simple, ritualized life, which included his essential morning glass of rum.
While his wife, Mrs. Lambert, becomes fiercely obsessed with maintaining their new, fragile status, forcing them into a mold that eliminates their old, comforting traditions. The new well doesn't bring happiness. It brings anxiety and cultural sterility.
This cultural flux extends directly into the intellectual sphere through the figure of H.J. Blackwhite. He's a commercial college principal and a writer.
And he has this kind of dual identity. He writes these tortured, earnest works like I Hate You, one man's search for identity, but he also writes aristocratic British romances,
which are, tellingly, constantly rejected by U.S. publishers.
His intellectual struggle is just heartbreaking. He realizes the implicit racism ingrained in the English language itself, noting that black is a damn bad word, and he attempts to rebel by finding a new, authentic identity, by creating an experimental new island language.
But his rebellion is instantly co-opted and neutralized. The establishment, represented by the Council for Colonial Cultures, they don't reject his rebellion.
They professionalize it.
They do. They offer him a grant to study his new language at Cambridge. His attempt at authenticity becomes a marketable cultural export, validated by the very powers he was trying to resist.
The ultimate study in hybridity and successful adaptation has to be Priest, or Gary Priestland.
Oh, Priestland is a master. He evolves into a charismatic preacher, a salesman, a TV personality, and a master of ceremonies at the Hilton Hotel.
His business model is utterly cynical. He uses religion to sell insurance. As the narrator notes, he frightens us about death, and then he insures us against it. He just commercializes the fear of the unknown.
Priestland is this force of chaos and adaptation. He thrives on disaster, becoming excited by death tolls on neighboring islands hit by Hurricane Irene, delivering the news with the detached thrill of a sports commentator.
And his supreme act of cynicism involves pressuring Ma Ho, the Chinese grocer who dreams of returning to China, to buy insurance.
And Henry, the club owner, he knew Ma Ho had diabetes, making his death imminent. Yet Priestland successfully closed the deal, demonstrating the power of fear over common sense.
And the true transactional nature of this act is revealed when Ma Ho dies shortly after, and Priestland is left howling in rage.
Not out of grief, but because he loses his expected bonus. It proves the transaction was purely about his personal profit, not the customer's protection.
And then, just as rapidly as the boom started, the external influence pulls out. When the American base closes, the local community, in a kind of frantic, desperate carnival, descends on the site.
They strip the base for every appliance imaginable. Typewriters, stoves, bathtubs, refrigerators. It's this chaotic, final plunder of the imported infrastructure, a desperate attempt to convert fleeting wealth into tangible, enduring goods.
And the conclusion of the story sees the formalization of this new, sanitized transactional order. Henry's club is taken over by this stern fat woman who may or may not be his wife, Imelda, now operating under the formal, tourist-friendly name Mrs. Henry.
And the club is transformed into a sanitized, cash register-driven tourist spot. The Coconut Grove oversees visitors' welcome, making the original owner, Henry, profoundly miserable. He's forced to conform to a sterile, marketable identity.
And Blackwhite, the intellectual, he fully embraces his institutional role. He's hosting Foundation-led representatives, discussing his experimental language work, having completely abandoned his attempts to write an authentic novel about a black man falling in love with a black woman.
His rebellion has been successfully co-opted into a system of grants and academic acceptance.
And the narrator, Frankie, takes his final flight from the island during Hurricane Irene, acknowledging the utter futility of resisting this change. He's surrounded by people moving with the times, like Summer, who has happily bought a Mixmaster and attends American-style barbecues.
While he feels he's moving backward, carrying the useless weight of the old world, the reality he knew is gone, replaced by a hyper-modern, transactional, and ultimately empty culture, validated by foreign grants and TV preachers.
So if we look back at these three vastly different narratives, the local election, the London office, and the island boom, we see the core stabilizing structures in each world just completely giving way. Elvira's traditional status markers, Mr. Stone's established career path, the island's old culture, they all collapse into new, often absurd, transactional forms of structure.
The distortion of original intent is the single unifying constant. The democratic ideals of Elvira immediately become a means for cash payments for votes, the establishment of marriage alliances.
And the haggling over rum accounts. It's a purely economic transaction masked by the language of politics.
Likewise, Mr. Stone's deeply personal and compassionate welfare scheme is instantly processed, marketed, and exploited. First, for the luxury tours funded by those £249 expense reports.
And then by external forces, like the Jehovah's Witnesses using it for religious pamphleteering. The noble idea becomes a tool for self-interest and proselytization.
And the island's cultural identity, its flag, which was meant to represent authenticity and pride, it becomes a marketable, exotic commodity for Foundation land grants. It's sanitized into a tourist-friendly spot like the Coconut Grove.
And the language of virtue, pride, toil, culture, is immediately appropriated to mask the raw transaction of selling oneself to foreign interests.
In the face of this information, overload and opportunity, which are essentially the same thing in these sources, individuals face a brutal choice. Either become cynically professional and emotionally detached,
like Whymper or Priest or the new Mrs. Henry,
or retreat into disillusionment, anxiety, and exhaustion, like Harbans, Mr. Stone, and Frankie.
What's fascinating to me is the recurrence of the precise mechanism of corruption. We saw in both the suffrage of Elvira and Mr. Stone and the Knight's Companion, the same religious organization, the Jehovah's Witnesses, actively disrupting and appropriating the secular structures.
Which suggests that the pressure to conform is not just economic but ideological, and that deeply held belief, when it's external to the system, is the ultimate destabilizing force.
So for you, the learner, seeking knowledge and insight in a world defined by competing claims, the primary takeaway from this deep dive is a mandate for radical scrutiny. You must always scrutinize the surface-level information, the political rhetoric, the corporate mission statements, the cultural manifestos.
Because what Naipaul shows us across these three microcosms is that the language of virtue, whether it's Knight's Companion or pride, toil, culture, is often the first thing to be appropriated to mask the simple, transactional, self-interested truth that's hiding just beneath the surface.
You must always look for the currency being exchanged. Whether it's the $500 for the votes, the 249 pounds for the luxury tour, or the Cambridge grant for the new language.
Right. What's actually changing hands?
So here is our final provocative thought for you to chew on. In a world where every grand unifying idea is instantly processed, marketed, and corrupted, from Elvira's messy democracy to Mr. Stone's sincere welfare scheme, is the final attainable victory. Not the preservation of the original ideal, but simply the quiet, empty realization, like Mr. Stone's after all his setbacks, that one has survived the collapse of belief, and that a calm, however empty, will eventually return.
A calm born, perhaps, of having stopped believing in the possibility of purity in a transactional world.